Hi everyone, this is Sarah Faye of Roots and Resonance. I'm recording this reading video in the woods near my home, and at the moment I'm really feeling into this kind of full moon Scorpio energy, and also the fact that there's a lot of planets at the moment in earth and water. So the sort of foundations, the survival, the spiritual, emotional and very much practical foundations of our lives are currently being held to account, to question. And that feels appropriate for me as I'm about to move house and recording this video in a beautiful piece of woodlands where I have many beautiful places that I like to sit and spend time, and I feel like I'm sort of moving into the emotional part of that as well as the practical. So that feels quite fitting for this reading. The full moon was officially yesterday, but this reading, it's not just about the peak of the full moon itself, which is obviously a very creative, expressive time for many of us who are connected to the lunar cycles. This reading is really from now onwards, for the next couple of weeks, because as soon as we start tuning in to our inner world, to what's really happening in our lives, in our dreams, what we're conscious of, what we're less conscious of, we start to already make changes. So that's slowing down and really tuning in is what these readings are all about. So how can you do that? What energies are currently at play for us? And so I pulled a couple of cards around that, and we have the first card from the beautiful Numinous Tarot deck, which I just received a week ago, a Kickstarter deck that I backed online, this by Noel Arthur Heimpel, a beautiful deck, which I recommend for those of you who would like a kind of more modern take on the tarot that is also very kind of representative and diverse of who we are as humans, who we are as beings. And I feel definitely, for me, the tarot traditionally doesn't always allow that kind of accommodation of diversity of who we really are as humans in terms of gender, sexuality, relationship to nature, relationship to our bodies, and so on. So there's quite a few decks at the moment that are coming out, really exciting decks that kind of look at that in a really honest and more representative way. So that was one of the kind of appeals of me getting this deck and supporting it. And the artwork's really beautiful as well. So we have here the first card, and I asked when I pulled this card, I asked what are the main themes relevant to us during the next couple of weeks at this current time. And we have the Five of Tomes, which is traditionally the Five of Pentacles. It's the earth suit. And we have someone here who is burning their most prized possessions, their sacred texts, to keep themselves warm in a snowy scene. The Four before it, the Four of Tomes, was all about what we save, what we invest, sometimes even the extreme of what we hoard and keep away from others and possessively hold on to. But this is really about loss. And this person may have been through a long period of time of suffering or loss, where their material world has been insecure and threatened perhaps for some time. But the change that we see in this card is you see behind them, there's not an empty space. There's not a bleak, icy scene where they're out burning their last possessions because they're so desperate. They are doing that because they've been in a story of scarcity and loss, and they've been focusing more on what they've not had or don't have, and seeing that as their ultimate fate over and above what still remains. If you look behind them, you can see there is a warm building, a shelter, and often with the Five of Pentacles we have one or two people on a path, very much downcast, suffering together. Perhaps their relationship was made and created from a place of suffering and lack, and they found support and solace together. But always behind them there's this lit up building, a public building that they can walk into and receive comfort and support and warmth and perhaps even counsel. And so here we have that represented by the library. And of course libraries are often community buildings in many places. Unfortunately a lot of them in this country have been closed down now with austerity, which is a shame. I used to be a librarian assistant, a job that I really enjoyed, but due to the cuts I left that work. And have been unable to sort of get back into it since, unfortunately. But I've also got other things that I'm doing. But knowing what I know about libraries is that they're a place to go for anyone, regardless of whether you want to read books or not. You can access information. You can access directories of community groups and support groups. You can speak to a friendly face and get a warm drink, or a place to sit that you can actually shelter in for a while to get your thoughts together. that can feel a bit removed from everything else, but also somehow there to help you feel a sense of support and connection. So really, whatever that represents in your life, that could be saying that you have perhaps spent too long being downcast on what you don't have, or what you can't do, or what you felt restricted from being able to do. It could be a very physical reality for you around health, around your home, around money, around work, around any combination of those material things, and that those foundations ultimately, by perceiving them as a form of lack, suffering, or an obligation that ultimately takes you away from what you truly value, all of those kind of ways and mindsets are not serving you anymore. And actually, if you just raise your head and look around you, or do a bit of research, a bit of asking around, or maybe become more sensitive to who is in your life right now and what they're offering you, there could very much be opportunities for recovery, or a new perspective, support, guidance, friendship, and shelter. And also, I think really as a wider theme, not just speaking about those themes on an individual level, but also in terms of our accountability ecologically, accountability socially, that if we need to experience our grief and our pain over, I don't know, for example, the vast amount of species loss that's happening on, I think it's pretty much a daily basis at the moment, you know, the pain and devastation over climate change. This is in the news now. Not very few of us are unaware of that, and of course socially the impact of those kind of changes as well. And that could be really depressing if we just absorb ourselves in the loss and in the pain of that. That needs space to be shared. If we suffer that in silence, we may feel powerless and helpless. But if we begin to join community groups, activist groups, or even get involved in local projects, tree planting, you know, community food projects, or we find ways in our individual life to make a difference to our local community and connect with like hearts and minds, we're going to feel less alone in that pain. And we're going to do something creative with that. Turn it into a fire that is about creativity, igniting change, igniting social change, igniting cultural change, creating connection and weaving community. And I'd say that was the ultimate message of this card, that right now as a human species on a planetary level, but also on the individual level right now in your own home and surroundings, looking at opportunities for support, for creating community, for connecting with communities that perhaps before you may not have spoken to or considered, walking into buildings that you've never explored in your community, and looking at what opportunities there are there. And also considering things like if you're associating your self-worth with money and what is not in your bank account, you're looking at your overdraft and going, I'm still overdrawn, my self-worth, you know, is rock bottom every time I look at my income, a position I myself have been in on many occasions. It's time to reweave that story, to recreate that story and look at what you do have, because you may be a really creative person. And okay, the capitalist current industrial system may not value some of the gifts that you have, but other people and other community groups may value that. Likely they will. Perhaps you need to promote yourself more, promote your gifts, your skills, your talents. Perhaps you need to reach out and look at other forms of exchange, perhaps beyond the monetary system, which I think is something that we're going to see potentially globally as the economy becomes a source of problems, you know, with climate change and other things that are going to hit. Look at other ways of bringing economy and abundance into our communities and how we can create that together and how we can best utilise all our many skills so that we are all valued rather than just those of us who are perceived as a cog in a wheel, for example, turning up for jobs that perhaps make us feel miserable or a low self-esteem. So really, how do we value ourselves, and how much of that value comes from our possessions, our wealth, our foundational situation, and how can we make changes in that? And weaving community is an absolutely important part of that, and seeking support, because it is there. The more we come together on that, really, the more resilient we'll be. So the second card that I pulled is a watery card. The Seven of Vials, which traditionally is the Seven of Cups, and it's the card of daydreaming, of fantasizing, of lying in the sun and forever thinking and fantasizing about what we'd like to do. And it's usually more than one thing. We have someone here who is window shopping lots of possibilities. They're staring at them, they're fantasizing about them, they're spending a lot of time doing that, but they're not actually picking which one or two is the best place for their energy to go into right now. So really, this is a time where individually I asked, how could we utilize this energy? And specifically, we're looking at material gains. So this might be talking about work ventures, projects, how we can connect more with others socially, relationally, or in terms of community. What fantasies and desires and dreams are we holding on to right now? And in a Scorpio new moon, this could be a very personal set of fantasies and desires, or it could be more about the relational. It could be a combination of those things, as well as also things like creativity. What dreams and desires do we have for our work and our place in the world and our place in community, and how we can reach out for community and connection in new ways to make ourselves seen and heard in ways that feel safe and valued. So there's opportunities for lots of things to happen right now, potentially, but pick carefully what you put your energy into, what you put your resources into, what you put your money, time and investment into, and where your insecurities may get in the way. Look out for self-sabotage, look out for putting more time and energy into things that are actually really expensive, in terms of your health, or in terms of your well-being, or in terms of your money. So pick wisely, look for what you're already getting positive feedback on, and perhaps put more energy into that, rather than trying to tend too many projects or fantasies or dreams all at once. And some of them you might have to shelve for another day. It doesn't mean you're not going to achieve them, it doesn't mean you're not going to do them, you just perhaps can't do them all at once. So something to think on. So the watery realms and the earthly realms of survival and of well-being are all being put into play right now. And a Norse rune, which actually came up reversed. So the question, when it's reversed, there is more of a question and a challenge around the theme that the rune is binding these two cards together, is Othala, the Norse rune of inheritance. So what are we inheriting? And we talk about, as a species, on a grand scale of things, we inherit the earth. The earth is our ultimate home. How we take care of the earth on our, in terms of our local surroundings, right from our doorstep outwards, what are we inheriting, and how can we somehow influence that and the health of that inheritance and legacy that we inherit and that we pass on to the next generation. And, from that level, that's very valid right now. And for many of us, we're actively involved in those kind of movements that question that and support those kind of questions. But also on an individual level, where are you seeking community and connection? Because to the Norse people, inheritance wasn't just about money, land or possessions. What ultimately supported all of that was the web of community, tribe, family and love and connection, and how the ancestors could guide, how the elders could teach and pass on their knowledge to those who would be coming after them, looking at kind of ancient knowledge and heritage and culture, and what role that has to play in our lives. And are there certain belief systems that really are no longer valid, no longer serving us, that are actually more destructive than they are creative and healing? And when it's reversed, I'd say Othala is saying question any cultural, moral, social baggage that's holding you back, that's impeding your progress, that's basically keeping you stuck in a place of scarcity, loss, or where you aren't valuing yourself or your gifts to the world. Burn that. That's the stuff you burn, not your gifts, not your talents, not your truth, but you burn the stuff that is no longer valid to you, because now it's time to act and do and be effectively the change that you want to see in the world. That famous quote. And Othala is about building resilience and community into the future. So anywhere where we see a problem with that happening for ourselves, really addressing that honestly and taking the first steps towards doing that, which might involve disentangling ourselves from what no longer serves us. Even if we once thought that fantasy or dream was what we really wanted, it may be that it isn't going to serve us or help others, perhaps with us. And really putting our time and energy into what does serve to create a resilient, connected, progressive future for ourselves and potentially for the rest of the planet. Because really, healing begins with ourselves, right? With our worldview and our perspectives, and with how we live our lives in relation to that. It's not selfish to focus on your own healing journey, because that will ricochet out in a wider web to everything and everyone else. Every other being is going to benefit from your working on yourself. And it's not a time to be alone in this. It's a time to connect. The previous couple of full moons were talking about kind of deep stuff, emotional stuff, where you might need some time to be alone, to retreat, to withdraw, to meditate. Now we're talking about the more active aspect of healing and growth. So reaching out towards others and making new connections is a fantastic way to process and deal with some of the challenging things we're witnessing in the world right now, and in ourselves. So yeah, so if any of that resonates and you would like to arrange a one-to-one reading, my website address, my social media, you can follow me on Instagram for regular readings and offerings. But also if you would like a more personalized, in-depth reading, just contact me, www.rootsandresonance.net. And I wish you a beautiful springtime, and also for those of you in the southern hemisphere, unfolding into the Samhain autumn time as well. And yeah, I'm sending you peaceful full moon vibes. Until next time.